Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to share with you my Paleo Frog deck profile, which has been requested for a very long time. But before we jump right into the video itself, there is one particular thing that I should probably say, which is the next deck choices, a particular thing for next week and everything, which I'll explain right now. Basically, I finally got my new order of cards, which for some reason took like 2 months. I don't know why, but I finally got them. And because of that, I finally will be able to do new things. So I'm going to follow up with old things one part of the week, and then the end of the week, I'm going to try to do the new stuff depending on your choices in the end of the video. So the next from the old stuff, the old deck choices are going to be the following for the next weeks are going to be mutants, salamangreats, generators. We're going to cover them up, a week at a time if I'm able to, of course. And then we're going to also do the new stuff as a side thing because I promised new things for a while, and I finally got the cards, which took, I don't know why, forever, but that's the reason for that. But before we jump right into the video, one last thing. Again, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It helps up a ton. Give a like if you just enjoyed the video as an overhaul, and let me know in the comments down below if there is some new text, some particular things that you're thinking of that I don't, in the comments that can make this deck better for a next update for next time. But without further ado, let's jump right into the video itself. Alright, so before we jump right into the list, for the last thing that I want to say is that there are two versions of Paleos that you can play. Basically, the standard Paleo Frog engine, the standard stuff, you're playing Paleo, Frogs, and a lot of traps. Or, in my opinion, the more superior version, which is the Rise to Full Height version, which is this deck is. Because I feel like Rise to Full Height is a better option for the deck, because it's giving you to use the graveyard as a resource, rather than just be monkey flip, pass, and that's it. If you lose your entire board, there's no way for you to recover. While in the the Rise to Full Height version, it's a little bit more easier to start building your board back to still do something. So I feel it's the better option, but of course, you can run whatever one that you want to. If you play the standard version, you're playing more draws and spells, probably, and more, generic traps. But in this version, you're playing more of set amount of cards, which we'll talk about them as we'll start the list. So starting things off, we're going to start with the monsters first, obviously. We're going to start with the standard 8 frogs, or, the level 2 water engine, I guess. And then the additional 2 monsters that we play is the 2 copies of Absolute King Backjack. Now in the standard version, this should be like 3 Ash Blossoms, like you playing with 3 Ash Blossom, or maybe an additional hand trap as well. But in this particular version, I think like the less monsters is the better, because this deck really like to use the grave as a resource. Now, of course, going second, there are some particular things that you might gonna want to change. Maybe you want to side into the standard Paleo strategy going second and other things like that. But for now, when you're going first, this is a great resource, because this is the standard engine, you know how that works. However, Absolute King Backjack is an absolutely beast of a card in this deck specifically, because you do like to send cards to your graveyard very much, and you like to use your graveyard, like I said, as a resource. Million times I'm going to say this probably in this video. So this card, when it's sent to the graveyard, allowing you to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them in any order in the top of your deck. And the other effect that you actually care about, which is the effect that this is a good setup for it, and it's going to happen 75% of the time, probably. That is, or if not even more, because your deck is 30 traps and 10 monsters, and that is the fact that if it's in the graveyard during the opponent's turn, you get to banish it, look at the top card of your deck, if it's a trap, set it to your field, and then you can activate it this turn, which making this card very good. It's another resource in the graveyard. If your opponent Lightning Storm you still have a kind of a mini follow-up. It's not amazing, but it's really good for a follow-up, and it's also trigger your Paleos in the graveyard, because it set this onto the field, and then you can activate it on the field, and then your Paleos can start going on if you want to get more monsters on your side of the field, which is really great. But that does it for the monsters. Now we'll move on into the Paleos themselves. Obviously, for the Paleos, we run 14 Paleos in this list, because this is the Rise to Full Height version. So for my Paleos, 3 Canadia, 3 Olonoidis, 3 Marilla, 3 Lynchocolia, I think the name is, and Dynamiscus as a 2-off. This is pretty much the standard lineup that you want to run in Rise to Full Heights, and I think nothing more. This is basically the lineup that you want to. Basically, these are the following effects when they activate this trap. Canadia is Book of Moon. Illinoidus is MST. Marilla is a Foolish Burial, good for traps. This guy is an Omega. And Dynamiscus is a Karma Cat. So it's basically the Omega effect in the graveyard, or not in the graveyard, like when it gets banished during the opponent's turn to return a card, or should I say, during the opponent's turn to return a card to the graveyard before you banish it. That effect. Basically, you return a card to the graveyard, which is pretty cool, and it's come up quite a lot in this list because you use your graveyard as a resource. Now, Dynamiscus is only here at 2 because Dynamiscus, you don't really have a whole lot of cards in your hand most of the time, so it's more of like maybe a follow-up or an additional good paleo name. And all of these cards, if you don't know, basically when you activate a trap in like once per chain, they're able to chain to that trap and basically summon themselves as a monster with 1200 attack, 0 defense, Aqua level 2, normal monster that's unaffected by monster effects, but banish them when they leave the field. Now, one thing that I should mention is once per chain, which is really important because sometimes I find people kind of like not able to understand that when they're starting playing the deck. So for new players, this is really important. When you're doing once per chain, right, when you activate the trap like on the field here, and then you have this, for example, in the graveyard, you activate this, and you have like maybe 2 of these in the graveyard, and you want to follow up once, right? So basically, if you activate one trap, you can only follow up with 1 paleo, because the moment that you follow up with 1 paleo, that means that the third effect cannot be chained to a trap, because this is the second effect on the chain link. I'm hoping it's kind of like understandable. Also, another thing to understand is that basically these cannot chain to counter traps because counter traps are faster than them. So again, counter traps, they cannot chain to them to special summon themselves in the graveyard, and then if you have only 1 trap and 2 paleos in the graveyard, only one of them can chain for any trap effect. And also for your opponent trap effects, but only 1 per each paleo. So if you have 3 backrow and 3 paleos in the graveyard, that's fine. You can even go 1, 2, 3, 4 in the grave, 5 here, and 6 in the grave again, and then some 3 monsters activating your 3 trap effects. But if you don't, like I said, you have 2 in the graveyard and 1 here, only one of them will be able to special summon. That's how that works. I'm sorry it took a little bit of time for some people who are not super interested in this, but for new players, I think it's really important to understand how this works, because I hear sometimes and seeing comments in other videos that they kind of like ask themselves how the idea of paleos work. You want to pretty much activate 1 trap at a time if you're able to just like able to summon traps, or should I say like the paleos as traps over and over again when you're able to. But that does it for the paleos. And then for the 9 important traps, in my opinion, in the deck are 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, 3 of the card that basically make the entire deck work, which is Rise to Full Heights, and then a pretty awesome trap in this deck, which basically trigger almost like a lot of your traps in general, or like set up your graveyard, which is Needlebug Nest, which is a card that I never thought will be good. Needlebug Nest says the following, is that it send the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard. And I counted the cards in your deck, and you have 23 traps or cards that love being in the graveyard as a following setup, or just as traps in general, so that is amazing. And also, again, you can chain your paleos again afterwards to this, which making this card very, very good. And yeah, you just fill your graveyard, this is just fill your graveyard what you need, which is really cool. Now, Rise to Full Heights is probably the card that you most of the time going to send with a Marilla or want to get to the graveyard, because this is the card that help you stall. Basically, the first effect doesn't really matter. The fact that you're able to make an opponent, like your own monster, at double defense this turn, and then its defense becomes 0, doesn't really matter. The effect that does matter is the effect in the graveyard that you get to banish it, target a monster you control, and then your opponent can only attack that monster that turn, even if your opponent, like, if your monsters leave the field. So basically, like, if, or should I say, like, you know, if they attack that monster and they kill it, they cannot attack anything else for the turn. So that is really, really cool, because you're able to basically just force them into only 1 monster that they need to deal with at a time, and then you can just build your entire lineup of traps and then use them as a resource, like I said, over and over again, which is great. And then Infinite Impermanence, pretty straightforward. It's a great trap. Basically, it's a hand trap, and also in this deck, it's also used as a trap on the field, which is also really, really good, and it's kind of like my backup plan against Lightning Storm, because a lot of people like to activate their cards in the main column, like, the center column. So most of the time I'm putting Impermanence here. They activate their Lightning Storm. I activate Chain Impermanence to one of the monsters on the field. I negate its effect even if it's one of my own monsters. And then that trap, Lightning Storm will not work because this will negate the spells and trap in that column for the turn, which is great, which I love quite a bit. And then for the last 7 traps in the deck, double Trap Trick, double Lost Wind, double copies of a card that probably people are going to ask me, which is Phantom Knight of Lost Remembrance, and then the 1 copy of Imperial Order. This is a pretty standard trap. I don't really think I need to explain it. This is probably one of the most cancerous cards in the game. Don't really need to explain. Lost Wind is just a great trap in the graveyard. You send it to the graveyard, and then when opponent monster summon a monster, or should I say any monster your opponent summoned from the extra deck, you able to set this on the field, and then this able to set itself on the field back, and then you can use it in the next turn. Of course, banish it when it leaves the field, but you have the one that returned to the graveyard, so you can use this over and over again if you need to. And it's just basically target a monster and half its attack, a special summon a monster, and it's half its attack and it gets effect permanently. Trap Trick is obviously 100 self-explanatory. You basically use this to set any trap from your deck, banish any trap from your deck, and then you can just activate only it for the turn. Now, Trap Trick, I wanted to run the third, but I didn't really find a spot for a third. But on the other hand, I sometimes don't really want to see it because I don't want to see multiples of this turn 1 because they don't really do anything. So 2 seemed the sufficient number with this, but I might actually just cut these and run third Lost Wind and third Trap Trick. Now, the reason why I also don't run Solemn Strike, which I also go for before we'll go with this, is that Solemn Strike is a counter trap, and counter traps don't really chain with your Paleos and don't really work that well here. If you're playing the standard Paleo Frog engine, not the Rise to Full Height version, play counter traps. Here, it's not really works that well. As for this trap is really, really good because it has an interruption on your opponent monsters, or even like able to turn your monsters into level 2 if you need to. But the point is like you target a monster, you make it into a level 2, and special summon this card not as a trap, and it's also lose 600 attack. So basically your opponent trying to go to Xyz, you target it, it loses 600 attack, and you summon this to the field as a level 2. And then this also triggers your Paleo in the graveyard, giving you another Paleo on your side of the field, another level 2, Xyz these 2 off into a rank 2 that you want of your choice, and you got 1 card rank 2, which is great. I like this card a lot, and it also have a synergy in a card in the extra deck, which we'll get to it. But again, it's up to you for the rest of the traps what you want to do, but I feel like these are pretty nice. But that does it for the main deck. Now we'll move on into the extra deck, and for the extra deck, pretty standard, 3 copies of Totally Awesome. We don't really need to explain this card that much. The double copies of Opobenia, and then the 1 copy of Onomalocaris, which is also really cool. Totally Awesome is the most standard card that you want to summon turn 1, probably. Sometimes you go into this depending on the matchup, but most of the time it's going to be Totally Awesome. Totally Awesome is just negate, obviously, and then it's also during the standby phase allowing you to basically summon a frog from your deck, which is great. So you summon Dupe Frog, send it to the graveyard with its own effect to negate something, and then you also get to search a swap frog from your deck to your hand as a follow-up, and giving you additional resources, which is amazing. Opobenia is really good as well. It's unaffected like all the Paleozoic these 2 by trap effect, monster effect, sorry. And then this card basically allowing you to activate your Paleozoic trap cards from your hand. And then if this card has a trap card as a material, you're able to detach 1 excess material from this card and add 1 Paleozoic trap from your deck to your hand. So this is really good because this is giving you additional resources as well as in following turns, and it's also allowing you to use the cards as resources in your hand rather on field, so they can be used as hand traps in a way, and also just like prevent your opponent from wiping your entire back row. Now sometimes defending this alone is a problem, but I think like in some matches that like you don't really see a lot of things that your opponent kind of like able to deal with this, you can summon this, put your normal traps on the field, still searches some traps if you're able to, and maybe use your Paleos as a follow-up. Mostly you want to do this only when you have a trap under it, but sometimes it's really dependent on the situation, so I like Opobenia as a 2-off. It's a great resource card. And then lastly, we have Onomalocaris. This card is okay. It's a little bit harder to summon, so that's why I'm kind of like, it's okay. But the card effect has 2 very nice ones. The Most important one is the effect that during either player's turn, if this has a trap as a material, you're able to pop a card on the field. But the other effect is also pretty nice. If a trap is activated on the field in the spell and trap zone, you're able to look at the top card of your deck. If it's a trap, add it to your hand. If not, mill it to the graveyard, which is pretty okay. So this is pretty much the standard Paleo lineup for this one. And then for the rest of the XCs, well, it's really depend on what you have for yourself. But unfortunately, I don't have the money for them. So I don't have Downward Magician and the Celestial, but I do have, in my way, the Zeus. So the Zeus is going to arrive sooner than later, so don't really worry about it. For now, I'm going to proxy it. But the point is, Javelin is not a bad card to help you go to Zeus. In multiple reasons. Javelin can target any monster on the field and make its attack 0. And then you can get over it by battle and then make your Zeus and still have your 2 negation Zeus. However, Javelin is also amazing with the trap, the Phantom Knight trap, because if you have a Phantom Knight card under it as a material, it can use this effect as a quick effect. And sometimes I'm going through this after like my turn to play with the trap for Phantom Knights. I just summon it. I summon a Paleo, I follow up this, and this just like either help me make a Zeus, or even if I'm not able to, this is just still, during either player's turn, negate monster effects and make their attack into 0, which is great. I love this card a lot. But that's pretty much it for those. Again, if you have the Downward Magician and whatever her name is, go for them, but for me, I don't have them, so I'm going with this. And then for the last 6 cards, honestly, it's up to you. 1 copy of Linkaribo, 1 copy of IP, 1 copy of Miss Starboy, 1 copy of Colonel Anemone, 1 Unicorn, and then the 1 copy of Avermax. These are honestly up to you. What do you want to run? Also, I think I moved the camera a little bit, so sorry about that. But point is, these are honestly up to you what you want. Linkaribo and Colonel Anemone are probably the cards I'm using on the most, because Linkaribo is for Absolute King Backjack to trigger his effect, and Colonel Anemone is to return things like Swap Frog, Dupe Frog, and starting your engines over again if I'm able to. Lock you into water, but most of the time it doesn't really matter, so that's fine. And then we have the rest of them, which are more utility-based. This is helping you for OTKs. This is sometimes if you're able to summon it. If you have access code, definitely play access code. This is for follow-up with IP if you're able to. Mostly not going to that. So the 3 that I'm going on the most are this, this, and this. It's really dependent on the situation. But Link monsters are not the big thing for your deck. You're mostly going to go into your Xyz monsters, which you have 9 of them that you're going to use. But that's pretty much does it for the deck profile for my Rise to Full Heights Paleo Frogs, I guess. Hope you guys enjoyed for this one. It's pretty straightforward. I hope I understand, explain as much as possible, because there are some particular things that need to be explained, especially about the Paleo's trap effects for new players and people who don't really understand that. So that is really, really important for me to explain for everybody to know, to let them know what they need to know. But yeah, that's pretty much does it for the Paleo deck profile. Let's move on into the next deck choices. Alright, so for the next deck choices, let's explain this again as I explained it in the start if people kind of like maybe don't really understand how that works. Again, just like I said in the start, the next deck choices from last week will happen in the end. Like, I'm going to try to do them once a week this, and then once a week one of the new things that are going to show up here, until I'll cover up all the 3 other choices that are going to be as the following, which are Mutants, Salmon Greats, and then Generators. So I'm going to do those as well as follow-up weeks for these, which are going to be the next deck choices from the new stuff. And for the new stuff, I decided to go with the following, which are going to be Vendrids, new update for them, Melothos, Rose Dragon, and a deck that I haven't done in a while, which is Cubic. So these are the 4 deck choices for the next week. For the new stuff, because FAs I'm going to try to cover up this week if I'm able to, if not next week, and then like we'll follow it up. But the point is, I want to do FAs because I promised this for a very long time, and I finally got the cards for FAs, so we're going to do it, and we're going to get to it. But that's pretty much does it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you do. Remember, creativity is the key in this game. Have a good day, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.